Federation of Ireland. I'm one of Cathy's colleagues.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay, so we put a bit of an agenda together, myself and Cathy. We'll have a look at it now, Cathy, if you don't mind scrolling down there. And if anyone wants to add anything, or if you want any more information on anything as we're moving through it all, please just ask. You know, we're in a small forum by default, so just ask any questions, and if we can help, we may have to take. If we can help, we will do. We may have to take questions away, and we may have to look into it, may have to come back to you, but I'm sure we can source your contact information from Charlotte and try and get some answers for you, and we can go from there, if that's all right. I've lost the agenda here now, Cathy. I don't know whether, I'm not sure if it's you or Charlotte that's sharing.
No, I'm going to try and send it to Charlotte because my computer keeps crashing. It can't cope with the pressure.
Yeah, okay, I can. Yeah.
Okay, let me just...
Okay.
I think it's...
So I'll just say to everybody, this is the first linkage group that Cathy and I have held. It's a learning experience for us as well. So we're recent reps. We've been involved now with the Housing SPC for about 6-7 months. So we'll go through it all, obviously, but like I said, just bear with us. And if anyone has any questions or anything, today is ended up being quite informal. So like I said, ask away. And if we can help, we will do.
Is that coming up by any chance? It seems to be giving the option to present it once more.
Yeah, what is strategic policy? Yeah, it's come up there.
Yeah, and can I just add, I am also new to the Galway County PPN relatively, so you know, it's kind of a learning by doing in terms of also knowing when to do these meetings, whether evening or daytime. So we're learning as we go along.
Okay, so Charlotte, we need to apologise to you because we didn't include you in the round robin. So there's our first.
Oh yeah.
So there we go.
You probably all know me by name or email. My name is Charlotte May, and I'm the Galway County PPN coordinator.
Thanks, fair play.
And
a great help to us guys.
Oh, that's good. That's great. And just to let you know that the PPN now has over 990 member groups across the county.
Great,
okay,
thanks
fair enough. Thanks very much, Charlotte.
Is the presentation coming up there at all for you now? Sorry now, I'm having trouble.
We can see your screen.
Your internet browser.
Oh, that's no good. How about now?
It's thinking about it, Cathy. It's doing something.
Oh, it's got. I've got the depth there.
I have it here shared. I'll just share it on my screen.
Great. Thanks now. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Don't worry. I'm just conscious of. So we'll go back to. I'm not the most techie of people, guys. So bear with me. Even though I've been doing most of this homework and crack the same as everybody else for the rest for ages. So is that showing up for everybody?
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. I will just say to everyone, obviously when I'm sharing something, I can only see the last person who spoke. So just bear, you know, obviously if just need people to interact and just speak up if that's all right, just while we're sharing a document like this. So we've done an introduction in the Housing Linkage Group. The Linkage Group is based, correct me if I'm wrong here now, Charlotte, but it's an opportunity for groups who are registered with the PPN to come together. It's a consultative forum. It's an opportunity for Cathy and I as reps to share information that we have, an overview of the strategic policy committee that we're involved in and we're representing the PPN on. It's just basically a chance for people to find out information, contribute and be involved. And obviously ask any queries or anything. So this is our first one, as I said earlier, and we will be looking at, once we've finalised we've finalised a schedule of SPC meetings for 2021. We'll be looking ideally to have a linkage group close to each one of those meetings, and we would welcome people to come along, obviously, and participate, contribute, give us information, queries that they would like us to take to the SPC and to get information on, and we can work through each of those queries and come back with an appropriate and relevant response as needed. So just wanted to touch on the second, move on to the second item there, just the Housing SPC. What is it and who's on it and how does it work? So basically, my understanding of it is each local authority has a series of strategic policy committees, and my take on it is basically they're an opportunity for, again, open consultative forum There's PPN reps on each of them. There's usually between roughly about, in my experience, about 6 to 8 of them on different subjects. So you'd have like, you know, you'd have a transport one, you'd have a sport and recreation one, you'd obviously a housing one, an environmental one. They may have, you know, different names, but they'd be similar, you know, and they're usually made up of PPN representatives from the relevant county or city. They're made up of local authority staff, so obviously housing staff, and the director of services will be one of the people that leads out on the forum and what it achieves. And then the other thing is there would be elected members from Galway County Council, obviously in this area, usually roughly about 6 elected members on each strategic policy committee. So basically they review policies, procedures, plans, aims, aspirations, all that kind of stuff. And they then take documents, review them, consult on them, they vote on them, they consult on them, and then basically they will take those to the full council meetings, which I think happen once a month, for them to be passed, so to speak. And then basically that is the operational working documents of the local authority. So Cathy and I have attended 4 meetings. As with everything in life these days, I'm sure you know, obviously the Strategic Policy Committee based calendar was affected by COVID. We did the meetings, you know, they should have been more spaced out over 2020. We ended up doing 3, Cathy, I think if I remember rightly, quite close together.
Yeah.
Kind of playing catch up, but also to try and keep to the agenda and the commitment of the council around what they were going to review, what they were going to roll in, what they were going to get up and running in 2020. So they're a very vocal bunch, and they're covering from Galway County. There's councillors. A guy called Councillor Joe Byrne, who's a Kinvara councillor, is the lead elected member. So basically, him and the Director of Services, Liam Hanrahan, run the Strategic Policy Committee. And then there's various other elected members involved as well, from Clifton out to Tuam and various other places. So basically, the way that it works is they would have a series of meetings, an agenda is circulated X amount of weeks beforehand. There's a schedule of documents and a schedule of work commitments, and we have some idea of the 2021 work commitments that we can share further on down. It's there at item 4 to show everybody, and you can see the kind of things that are coming up. So I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know if it kind of gives everybody a feel for what the Strategic Policy Committee is, what Cathy and my role is on it, and how the PPN fits into the overall picture.
Thanks for that, Marcella.
Do you have anything to add, Cathy?
So maybe I'll go into the agenda point 3, which is the overview of the meetings in 2020, to give a direct taste of what it's about, and therefore what your valued impact can be. So as Marcella noted, we had a baptism of fire in our role of reps, and we didn't follow the usual route of representation softly. It was more you jump in, and it was within the context of COVID, so everybody was half distracted, and there was the technology to get on board with, and there was the I'm on the golf course kind of a thing happening a lot during the meetings as we tried to negotiate new technology. So it was a tricky start, but I would recognise that well, first of all, I'd acknowledge that this is an SPC, therefore it's at a policy level that the conversation is being had. The opportunity for organisations is to try and interpret their issues of concern at a policy level for the relevance of this space. If we look at the 4 to 5 meetings that were held, the agendas to those meetings and the discussions that were held were all at the policy level of reflecting on key policies that needed either to be amended or implemented. And therefore the discussions were had on the minute wording of each of those policies, and a consensus on is this agreed, and therefore approval of those policies on each of the meetings was had. So I suppose the first thing to recognise in the context of an organisation is to think about, okay, my priority area of work may be, for example, it could be a travelling community, it could be a vulnerable group like the older persons or people with disabilities. So then you have to look at what the priorities of the meetings were. For example, throughout the year we looked at Galway Social Housing Delivery Task Force, which is being established, the West Regional Homeless Action Plan. We looked at the Housing Allocation Scheme, the Tenancy Sustainment Strategy. As they were brought to the table as policy documents, they were reflected upon as a grouping and approved. Our opportunity as reps is to swallow, if you like, digest those documents in advance of the meeting, identify any of the spaces where those documents were relevant to the wider PPN members, get the input of the PPN members as their concerns arose around those documents, and feed them in at the table. So the last report that we gave out in October highlights the work that we did in that approach. So for example, very practically, there was on the agenda the housing allocation scheme. So as a group on the PPN, your role with this SPC would be to think, okay, so the housing allocation scheme is on the agenda for this meeting. What is the housing allocation scheme? Does it have any relevance to my reality, my funding, my housing issues of concern? So off the top of my head, I wouldn't have thought so, but I was going to the table with an awareness from a different side of the house of mental health concerns, and I had a couple of issues that were presented to me around the housing allocation scheme. So very practically, what did I bring to the table? I asked about how roughly 30% of the current housing stock is 1 to 2 beds, as roughly 70% of the demand is for 1 to 2 beds. And I asked the question, could sharing be facilitated in cases where individuals are willing to share for a period of time until 1 or 2 beds become available, rather than being considered adequately housed in shared accommodation? So that's a very practical example of what happens at these meetings and what our capacity is. So what we need to know going into the meeting is, what is the agenda, what is the policy being discussed, and how does it relate to me in my world of disability or older persons or traveling community. And in the context of this, the question that I had to ask on behalf of those coming from mental health actually was specifically around the current housing stock and the allocation and the bed allocation. So a bit of a technical question. And while it didn't relate to an individual who has a disability right then and there, or an individual with mental health issue right then and there, I hope by highlighting this housing allocation scheme as it was on the agenda, the application of that scheme was analysed. So we had the authority and we had the capacity as a rep to go, can we just look at the allocation scheme? Can we reflect on the bed and the status of that and how beds are allocated? So if you're looking at from your lens of the travelling community, perhaps you would have the same issue around the housing allocation scheme that you would like, that you might have liked to have raised. And then the response that we got was that it was recognised by the council that individuals can apply separately or combine with others. But if they combine with other individuals, they will be offered a single tenancy. There is no facility for multiple tenancies of a single property, which is the constraint that the organisations I was representing on the day were bringing to the table. That ideally, those who go into the tenancy in a shared accommodation could ideally maintain the integrity of their individual status, but that didn't fly. But I hope that gives you a flavour of very practically what it is that we do at the table. Follow-up query was, could sharing be facilitated in cases where, we asked the question if there was a policy mechanism to be established on a case-by-case basis, this is a different issue, to assess the appropriateness of backdating housing applications of individuals where it could be evidenced that due to severe illness they were unable to make a timely application for housing. So that sounds a bit wordy. What does that mean? A lot of the issues that we would have been represented about were the concerns that people applying might have lost attention to their application because they fell ill for a significant period of time, or their circumstances were such that they dropped the ball, if you like, as an individual. So we asked about, if there's any policy mechanism to support that. And in response, it was an interesting response. The council referred to the appeals mechanism. Now, I think it's an Irish thing that we don't like to complain, but we do like to complain about complaining. And the recognition at the level of the SPC was, we need to inform people, as reps, we need to inform ye, the members, that actually the appeals process is there for a valid reason and it works. and it's not something to be intimidated by. It's an appeals process that is there to support people's issues of concern, and people are very welcome to use it. It's not, in my head of old, an appeals process was a negative. It was a derogatory term, and you didn't expect it to be a welcome space to raise your issues. However, it was emphasised that anyone who's looking to can appeal, and appeals are reinstated with time on the list awarded back to them from the date. So it was a positive interaction of us representing issues and those issues being talked through at the table. But I suppose the main point lies in the fact that it is the issues raised against the purpose of the SPC, which is looking at the policy level of implementation. Does that give you a flavour of what level of conversation is at? I see nodding, so I'm taking that as a win. And also just to recognise that it is at that generic thematic base of advocacy that we're raising issues. So it's not an individual, my neighbour down the road has an issue with his neighbour, can you raise it for me? It's at a thematic basis. I'd be reluctant almost to say organisation. I think it's broader than that again. It's about recognising that there's issues of concern that go across organisations, and they are warranted to be raised. Now, you will have people raise individual-like circumstances, but they're a very expert group of people, I would have to say. Marcella, you'd probably agree with me. They know their stuff. So they're very fluid and very capable to respond at the table to the immediate issues of concern. So that's something that I was quite impressed by, in that the expert knowledge, it's not as though you go to the meeting and it suddenly said, oh, that's an ecumenical matter now, Mrs. Or I'll have to look that up in the dictionary of housing. They come well versed and they are live to the issue of housing. So the issues that we raise, they get readily addressed at the meeting. So that's a comfort for you. If you have particular thematic issues of concern, to acknowledge they can well be dealt with at the table, if that makes sense. The more recent strategy that was discussed was the antisocial behaviour strategy, which was out for submission there. And that was an interesting one because it gave us an insight to the implementation of the strategy, but also the rationale for their approach. And it was a very, I would say, community-led, positive engagement approach by the councils, where they wanted to alleviate the pressure of people having to negotiate the tension of raising antisocial behaviour in their communities and take it from them, so that the strategy would support a process whereby these issues of antisocial behaviour would be dealt with by the council, so that it's a step removed from me giving out about my neighbour's dog, if that makes sense. So it was a very positive meeting, the last meeting we had in November, to acknowledge that that's the thinking. So it gives you an insight as to the rationale and the thinking of the council at that strategy level. So that's just another flavour of it. Are there any questions, or does that resonate with you as to how you could approach, or how that gives you a framework of understanding how you interpret it for your cohort of need?
Well, it's very much like the local traveller communal committee, as it is. Like, we go there, we don't go there talking about individual basically. We talk about everything in general, and which is the housing. It's based around the TAP, which is the traveller accommodation programme. You know, we do. My only issues there, I suppose, I would be kind of concerned about the housing estates and things like that, for the upkeep of them, you know, and the tenants, like the amount. Obviously I can't talk about that, but it is based around that, and any issues with the TAP, we talk about that. But like that, we're not allowed to talk about any other individuals on their own or like that, even though you would want to, but you can't. So we understand like the terms and conditions, if that makes sense.
I suppose you've hit on an example there of an issue of concern around estate management, which is on the agenda. You know, it's part of our terms of reference to give regard to. Yeah. So if you have particular instances of concern around that, you almost anonymise it, or we kind of interpret it, myself and Marcella, as, okay, there's an issue generally of estate management, could allude to the region or the territory, you know, just to ensure it's within the boundary of County Galway, and we could readily present that. That's legitimate. Yeah,
well, and I'm glad to have this forum to say it. My issue is working with the local community is that we have nearly 99% are very low income, and you know, we obviously have the tenants handbook, which tells you, you know, you need this, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for that. And while the people I have dealt with have no issue with doing that, they mightn't afford, they would want and would be happy with if the council could, you know, maybe put in those doors and they take the money from their rent every week. That's what they would like to do, you know, and I've contacted the council a few times about that, but it's an issue that I really do think needs to be addressed, because there's a lot of stuff there within the handbook that the tenants can't afford to get down. They won't have the money to pay for it. But if they were allowed to do it that way, like say for instance, say, look, if you put in, you know, new windows for me and look, take some of my rent every week, that's solving a lot of problems. You know, no one's asking for a handout. They don't mind paying, but obviously they can't pay down. So I do think it's something that does need to be addressed. I remember years ago, when you're a tenant of Galway County Council, and them being the landlords, if you had an issue, you're paying rent and you needed to get something fixed, they'd come out and do it. But obviously, somewhere down the line, that all changed. You know what I mean? And but I'm not really sure. I don't think it's working. You know what I mean? And since I started working with the tenants, I really do think it's an issue that does need to be addressed. And I won't say was challenged, but a compromise. You know what I mean? Compromise, you know, in partnership with the tenants. So yeah, definitely something I would, if I could get the opportunity to say that.
Yeah,
and it's good to have this floor.
To be fair, Nora, this is the opportunity for you to. I suppose what Cathy can do is take the holistic overview of what you've given there. Like when you're talking there, I'm hearing things around tenant recharges, you know, fixing things in a family's home and then recharging them and coming to a reasonable agreement with them over a period of time. I don't know if Galway County Council are able to do that or have that within their within their housing management. You know, but we can find out those kind of things out, or we can at least find a point of reference via the SPC where we can get some information from some of the housing liaison officers or whoever manages that area of the housing department. You know, the other things I can hear and you talk about there is like planned programs and asset management, you know, like new windows and doors are usually done on a program where they would tender, they would do a certain estate or estates, you know, and they would put an investment into it, you know, and it'd be like cyclical maintenance done every, I don't know, you know, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, that thing, you know. And again, like I'm going off what we do in Cluid, but, you know, I'm linking that to some of the things that, you know, what you're talking about there, as well as then what Cathy touched on, like the grounds maintenance and the estate management. And, you know, that would be done, I would presume, in a different area of council. But again, it's an area where we can say we're hearing from the PPN. These are the kind of things that people are interested in. What are the policies? What are the procedures? Who's involved? You know, and if there is matters arising, how do Galway County Council tenants progress them? Do you know? So I think, you know, there's a communication and estate management, a grounds maintenance, there's asset management. Like you raised a lot there. And I would say they touch various different strategic and operational policies and procedures. But again, like this is the forum to raise them, and we can take the themes, as Cathy was saying. Do you know what I mean? And then, you know, we won't put it to the tenant in Loughrea who you work with, but we'll put it as in a general.
It is a general approach.
I'm just
definitely
picking somebody out of the sky, obviously.
No, but it actually was a tenant in Loughrea.
You know, so like
no, but it actually, well, look, it is as you said, it is holistic. It's going right across the board. But just while I have the floor, there is one more issue I do have, and this is kind of affecting a few people. It's the threshold, you know. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Okay, I'll take one family, and the husband works. Okay, he's on a good wage. The wife doesn't work at the minute. The baby's 10 months old, so she's a student. Okay, they don't fit criteria for a mortgage. Okay, so they can't get a mortgage. So they don't fit the criteria because they're above the threshold for the council. So they applied to 3 councils, one in a different county, one say in Galway County and Galway City. They didn't for Galway City, even though her family's from Galway City. They didn't meet the dependency and commitment, okay? So they're stuck in limbo. They can't contact the likes of Cluid or any of those housing associations because they can't get on the housing list, you know. So then I have another issue with a family, they've maybe 10 kids, okay? That sounds like a lot of money coming in, but there's a lot of outgoings, right? A lot of outgoings, they have clothes, they have food, there's everything like that. So they can't afford. And then again, they come from the community. It's very hard to get private rental of a house that size for the family. So they're stuck in a 3-bedroom house with say the dad's father, right? And they can't get anywhere because they can't get on. So this is a big issue that now I've even written to the Minister for Housing about this myself. You know, I've written to Senator Eileen Flynn, look, guys, can you just flag this? Is there any way to rise those thresholds? So for me, that is, if people who just, they don't want to hand out, they want to hand up, and they're missing that opportunity. So that would be a big bugbear for me, guys, and I'm just glad to kind of get it in there. And, you know,
but you have a legitimate ask. Oh, Lisa's coming in there. It's just to recognise, Nora, that if you have something written down already, will you send it on to Charlotte? Because anything we have of substance to represent.
Oh, definitely. Well, I can put a kind of little draft together, and if you send, maybe I can.
Yeah, anything at all. But this is exactly what this is local democracy in practice. In theory, this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. So if I were you, I'd be expecting to see, okay, whenever the next SPC is, you'll be looking for the report fairly quickly after that, with an expectation of those key questions asked and answered. Regardless of whether or not we can move mountains, at least you can evidence the fact that you're trying to progress the issue. And we as your reps have a responsibility to document that and to ask those questions. And I think we're a bit spoilt, I'll say it now, Marcella, because she has a wisdom of knowing the system of housing.
Wisdom?
And I will acknowledge as
Cathy, that's the kind of word my mom uses. Please don't say that.
Bad memories. But I will acknowledge that we're lucky in that regard, because it's a very heavy weight of policy conversations to be had, and you're easily intimidated with the weight of that language even, and the vocabulary used. And if you do not know the bureaucracy and the system of how housing is done in a county, then you'd be swimming. We'd be lost now at one of these meetings. So even when you were giving your examples of your issues, I could see Marcella nodding, because she knew, and she was able to reply there with an in-depth, well, this refers to A, B, C, and D. I wouldn't be able to offer that myself now, in fairness, but at least it gives us a better edge to the conversations we're having at that policy meeting. I wouldn't suggest that anybody take on the role of a rep of an SPC lightly, but one thing I do recognise is the weight of housing. It's such an intense or a dense area of work. You know, it's a very heavy industry of work. So reading into that from outside and trying to identify the manoeuvring around the system is a very hard thing to be doing. So we're lucky in County Galway. Lisa, you had your hand up there.
I did, yes. No, I was just going to really agree with Nora there in terms of, I know in terms of the threshold, that's been an issue for people with disabilities as well, where they might have a partner who's working. You know, I've heard of one situation where they were €50 over the threshold, but you know, yeah. And the other thing as well, one question I have around the threshold is when was it changed last? You know, and the same again with the housing adaptation grant. I asked that question to Sharon Lawless in the City Council, and she told me it was 12 years ago that it hadn't been, the threshold hadn't been changed on the housing adaptation grant. So I think these really do need to be looked at. Another question I had that I'm kind of interested in is whether, I know in terms of the local authorities, they seem to work within their budgets for the year because that's what they're granted, you know. So I'm just wondering, in the county council, I kind of might know more on the city council, but to what extent are they looking a bit, you know, to future planning and to, you know, let's say I'm coming from a position of people with disabilities, but to what extent are they actually looking at forward planning around, say, for people with disabilities and, you know, lifelong adaptable housing that, you know, from design stage, you know, so is that beginning to take a hold yet, or?
Well, not wanting to kick the can down the road in my own sector of disability, I would acknowledge that we have a structure of meetings and a work plan for the year. So the housing and disability strategy wasn't on the agenda this year. COVID was part of that, but we do have a schedule of work plan for next year. So it's within that gift. Notwithstanding that, the issues that you've raised could well be highlighted, and Cliona, you're here as well from Mobility West, and I'm mindful of it as an opportunity for the disability sector as well as any other sector to raise such of an ask for future planning and innovative practices. Now, in fairness, and Marcella, you can come in here. They did have at the last meeting a presentation from another approved housing body. So they do have an eye to forward planning as well as best practice planning. So they're not. There's an openness to that, and they are behind. They would like to see that. And I know at a national level, in a previous meeting I had, there was a regard that, or there was a recognition, or from the Department of Housing, that local authorities weren't availing of all of the funding for the likes of CAS, and there was a bit of a slap in the wrist, wasn't there, Marcella, at one stage in that context? So I think they need to be seen to be doing better in this area. They just need to get, and it's an opportunity for your sectors. And similar, Nora, if there's lifestyle accommodation best practice models of abroad that you want raised as and evidenced, and suggested for approaches of how houses are constructed and how developments are made for the cohort of yours that you represent, feel free to raise that. I think in one way it's a good time to be raising innovative best practice.
I'll just touch on a couple of things there that you were raising. Like what I would say is there was an issue that I would have heard about it along the way in relation to applying for CAS funding and approved housing bodies. And this is my take on it. Like, I'm not speaking for the sector. It's just obviously what I would have picked up over the years. And I would say that, like, it's some of the larger, the tier 3 housing approved housing bodies. Like, I suppose to apply, I remember achieving some CAS funding in County Cavan a number of years ago, and trying to work with my colleagues in our new business section to try and purchase some bungalows. And 4 years into it, we still hadn't achieved it. So, like, to me, and again, it's a very layman's naive approach, but what I would say is, and it's opinion driven, but like, I would honestly say that the whole capital assistance process, from funding, from housing agency, from the HFA, down to, through the local authorities and the approved housing bodies, it's a very long, complicated process. And then trying to source, like, we would have been successful in 2015, along with Galway Simon and Cope Galway and City Council, for some CAS funding, and trying to purchase 16 one-off units for to offer long-term accommodation for people who had a homelessness history. And we've achieved 13 of those, which is great. We've achieved it, as in the 4 partners have achieved it. But what I would say is, like, with increasing prices, quality of units, approved housing bodies shouldn't be buying dodgy units, for the want of better words. Do you know what I mean? We need to buy good quality housing that isn't going to cost a fortune to manage, and also not be great for the people or the families that are living in them. Just in relation to the threshold and the housing adaptations grant, just what you were saying there, Lisa, also what you were saying, Nora, around the thresholds, I think that's something very valuable that Cathy and I can take from this meeting. There is a draft schedule of priorities, commitments, work plan, however you want to call it. And I think that, after this meeting, Cathy and I should regroup, grab some of the themes that have been put to us today, and we should go back and we should feed into Liam Hanrahan, who's the Director of Services, and to Councillor Joe Byrne, and say, this is what the PPN members are offering up. This is what is of interest within the PPN. This is what people are looking for information and to be steered on and steered through via the SPC. So just to be reassured that, by taking the time today to come today to contribute, we will take these themes and we will bring them back, and we will. Now, we can't guarantee that they will be covered, or, it could be Q3 or Q3 2022, but we will keep reiterating the message about what's important to the PPN members. So again, as you discover and you hear the issues and themes with the people that you are working with in the day job, so to speak, please bring them to this forum, and please keep coming, is what I'm saying, because it helps Cathy and I to stay relevant and to stay timely, and to understand what everybody is dealing with as well, and what's important to people that touch the PPN. So I hope that's of help.
And in regard to that, recognising what's been said today, there's there's obviously two levels of your input to us. There's your immediate issues of concern on behalf of your members that you should feel welcome to raise, but then there's the broader strategy that you can have a thought about of, okay, well, what would address the longer term needs of my cohort? What would it be, you know? And the bureaucracy of the system is always going to be there, but innovative practices and best practice ideas around models of housing and accommodation, I would say, would be well received to even be listened to. And having done your job of evidencing them to us, in terms of your evidence of need, and then in terms of your evidence of best practice, what you'd like to see, I think that would be really soaked up and welcomed by the SPC, because they don't know what they don't know. You're the experts in your area and your niche of support. And it is an ask of you, but what I find on other fronts of advocacy is critically evidence of need and come forward with the solution, you know? So have a good quantifiable amount of, you know, what is it that you're coming with the concern around, you know, what's the scale of it, and therefore what's the solution. Now, don't worry too much if you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole. That can be our job to interpret, you know. If it's not, you know, if you're just coming with your wish of a solution, that's okay right now. And Nora, I'm really mindful of your wisdom, of your expertise. So, you know, what are your immediate areas of concern based on the clients that you work with, the members that you serve, but then you've identified also your broader concern and the broader wish that you have. And that's the two levels that the SPC can work out, if that helps.
That's great. It's absolutely great, because like since I start working on accommodation, I find the people, the you know, the community are reaching out to me, and obviously, you know, the Galway Travel, we don't have any power, we just advocate on their behalf. And there's like so many, like we have a lot of issues. One of the issues I would have been emailing the council on their behalf, and I would say, and I don't know, I could say this to Marcella, you might let me know. I would say to them, look, if you don't have, I might have a family with 3 kids, whatever, could you refer them to a housing association? And that is an issue that I'm finding, that I don't know in County Galway compared to the city. Is there a difference in percentage-wise of families being referred? Obviously, like there's a shortage of housing association, but if the council could refer a family, you know, that's something that I'm coming up against, kind of a blockage as well, you know.
No, I can. Well, I can give you an overview, Nora, of how it works. There's all properties, all social housing properties that are approved by housing bodies owned, all are obviously they're funded in different ways. So way back 8-9 years ago, there was a scheme called the CLSS scheme. And then there was that's actually phased out now. It's gone for about 8 or 9 years. And then there's the capital assistance, which is CAS. There as well, using that. Maybe you know some of this, so forgive me if I'm telling you stuff you already know. And then the more modern, but not that modern, because it's around about 8 or 9 years now, is the CAF and PPN model. Okay, so basically under any approved housing body now that buys or builds any new properties, they will be funded through the CAF and PNA system, which is administered. It basically, the approved housing body makes an application, cut a very long story short, to the housing agency, housing finance agency. Funding is approved, agreed. It's up to 30% of grant funding that's administered through the relevant local authority, right? So basically, as part of all of that, the local authority has 100% nominations. So for us, whenever we get a vacant property or a new property, we have to go, any approved housing body that's, if it's a car funded property, has to get a nomination from the local authority. So Galway County Council in this. So basically then the emphasis is on them to provide a suitable nomination for your 3-bed, 2-bed bungalow, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? And they will source that nomination from the housing waiting list, from approved applicants for social housing support. And basically then so any approved housing body these days is that, you know, in back in the day, we used to be able to maybe look at walk-in applicants or people who approached us directly. I do have to say them days are pretty much gone, because now it's 100% nominations via the local authority, and the family or individual has to have been assessed for social housing support. approved. And what I do see with Galway County Council is that they usually tend to have a number of, it's usually, it's not the right way to say it, but time served on the list, do you know? And then obviously if there's priority, there's homelessness, there's disability, there's areas of specific need, you know, all that kind of thing, but that would come directly from the housing department. Once the family or the individual is nominated, so the likes of Cluid respond to whoever, if they accept the accommodation, their housing waiting list application is closed. So then they're off the list because their housing need has been met, basically. So I don't know if that helps. But obviously, like, you know, feel free to contact me directly if I can help you in any way. I will do. I'm just conscious we're kind of steering off a little bit off the agenda, but that's what these forums are for as well, and it's good for people. You know, like, I really welcome the questions, and I hope the information we're given is informative. I hope it's helping. Do you know? Does that help, Nora? Is that what you needed?
Yeah, that's it. That's definitely just something that is another issue, because we do have a lot, but especially I work in Ballinasloe, you know, and there's a lot of people, and you know, and I was kind of thinking we don't have enough houses for all those families, and there's a lot of what we call, I suppose, the hidden homeless. So you have families living with families, you know, and then you have, and I don't even know if I should bring this up about HAP, but
I do. Yeah.
HAP houses, my God. I mean, I have a lot of people families contact me where landlords aren't getting, you know, they just dump them in the houses and then forget about them. And obviously that the council, Galway County Council, you know, the landlords are the HAP landlords, you know, but if the landlord who's renting that house doesn't kind of interact with the tenants, and Galway County Council doesn't, you know, is there like someone in the middle that should kind of, like, they do, like, and I don't want you to be rambling, like, but if I do contact Galway County Council, you know, they will kind of do contact the landlord, but sometimes the landlord is uncontactable. It's just, I do feel that there should be a lot more done around HAP. I do think there's a lot of issues around HAP accommodation that need to be addressed as well, and it's kind of the condition of the houses, you know, not enough equipment being put into the houses, you know, and all of these kind of things. Who do you turn to? Usually it's me, the family. If I help one family and someone hears about that, then I get someone's ringing me, you know, if you're kind of, and I'd love to help everybody, but, you know, it's kind of a very stressful situation for them. If I can say, look, I'm not getting anywhere with anybody, you know, but definitely HAP housing is something that should be addressed.
That's good news in a way, Nora, because it's on the agenda for the SPC to review the process of HAP next year.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great.
That brings us
good to hear.
Yeah, and I think the good news is that a lot of the issues raised today are on the work plan for next year. So I think it's our job to get more coherent about what the issues are. And Marcella, when we have approval for circulation of that work plan, maybe that's the priority to get circulated.
Yeah, I agree. What I would do, if everyone's happy, I might move on to the next agenda item, just in and around. I know I stopped sharing, I'm being selfish so I can see everybody, I won't lie. But the next thing is the draft housing SPC work plan and the schedule of meetings. I think it'd be good if people in the meeting could see this. But do remember, obviously, it's a draft, it's not agreed as of yet. Councillor Burns shared it with Cathy and I yesterday, I think it was. So, like, you know, you'll see the variety and the volume of what the committee is hoping to achieve next year. As with most things this year has been different, do you know what I mean? But we have achieved quite a bit, and we can show you one of the reports that Cathy and I completed and sent back to the PPN, and we'd encourage you to have a look at the reports after each meeting, because it'll give you an overview, and if you've any questions, obviously, about what was covered at that meeting, then you can pop an email to us. So I'll just share this. This is the draft. I have it here. Is that coming through for you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe a slight little bit bigger, guys.
No bother. Is that okay, Nora?
Yeah, that's a lot better. Thanks very much.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Councillor Byrne and Liam Hanrahan met together and had a look at this. But again, as we said, it's, you know, they must have looked at it the 9th of December. So obviously it's still up in the air, but it pretty much quite comprehensive, and it covers a lot of the stuff. So you can see some of the things that are covering. They've touched on the Rebuilding Ireland plan. the update from the Social Housing Task Force, the voluntary housing, which is the likes of myself, and Cluid. Is that coming through okay?
Yeah.
Can you still see it? Yeah, sorry, I got a message there, that's all. So just a little bit there around CAS projects, updating on CARF projects. There's a vacant home strategy that's going to be looked at, the housing grants, which is some of the stuff you mentioned there earlier, Lisa. There's a Rebuilding Ireland home loan. You know, some of this stuff Cathy and I wouldn't be familiar with, wouldn't be involved in it, purely local authority driven, owned and delivered. So obviously, you know, there's learning here for us as well as reps. There's a bit there on social housing, a review of the housing allocation scheme is something that's been completed. Social housing assessments are going to be done in Q2 2021. The review of the rent scheme, that's to be confirmed. Housing need assessment overview scheduled for Q2 2021. I know a housing need assessment, for those of you, is basically they make contact with everybody that's on the list to assess their social housing needs at this time. Because as you know, like some people could be on the list for several years, you know, and families grow, family decrease, you know, people's needs and medical help, medical conditions change, you know, so it's a case of most local authorities try to do them every 2 years, but it is very resource intensive, as you can imagine, you know. Areas of choice is around the expression of from the applicants about where they want to be housed. There's a bit there about choice-based lettings, and a review of the housing assistance payment process, and a review of the rental accommodation scheme. Homelessness, there some priorities around it. Then there's the TAP, as you mentioned, Nora. There's a review of the 19 to 24 programme, and it's to be updated in Q3. This is what they're proposing, you know. A 2021 works programme, not really sure what that is, but I would imagine it's maybe to do with traveller-specific accommodation around the county. Feedback from the Traveller Accommodation Consultative Committee, you're probably more familiar than that with I am. A little bit more on the local authority housing stock, 2020 plan versus actual inspections, planned inspections, voids, vacant homes action plan, the tenant handbook induction, ASB strategy, do you know? Housing disability strategy, we've touched on that earlier, and Cathy and Lisa would be very au fait with that. The affordable dwelling purchase, this might touch into one of those, you know, that category that you were saying earlier around, you know, they're not eligible for a mortgage, but they're not eligible for social housing either, you know. And I know that there's a cost rental, affordable rental scheme coming from the government. It's very early days, but it's going to be rolled out via the housing agency. I know there's a working group recently put together within Cluid for us to start working with the housing agency and the housing alliance on it. So that's definitely coming, but that's obviously in my other life, you know, but it's obviously being mentioned here as well. Control of horses, always a popular subject. Presentations then by outside bodies, a list is to be agreed. So Cathy touched on this earlier. She was right there that Peter McVerry came at the last meeting there in November, just in relation to the repair and the lease scheme that they do. They're recently started being present and active in Galway. They're working away in the modular housing in Galway City, and they came to Galway County SPC to obviously put forward what their service offering and their service delivery is about. Very long-term homelessness approach, but you know, obviously there's different organisations and support organisations that are specific to certain needs and then are more generalistic, like some of the larger approved housing bodies and obviously the local authority itself. So I hope that gives everybody a kind of, you know, an overview of the variety of that comes under the umbrella of the SPC. That's some of it, that's not all of it, you know, and I would definitely say that. And as the years move on and there is more work plans, commitments, the SPC is working through stuff, rolling things out, then, you know, everything, you know, things have to be reviewed consistently as well. So there's usually about 4 or 5 meetings a year, usually quarterly. I've seen that in other SPCs. As we said earlier, a bit different this year, but I do think it'll settle down now. Everyone, you know, we've kind of got our heads around the COVID working ways in certain ways. And I can anticipate that there'll be a scheduled meeting soon, which we will make sure are publicised to the PPN. And our aim would be to have a linkage group near to the time. And we do really welcome engagement, you know. Has anyone any questions on that? Is there anything, like, we will take some of the themes of some of the things that have been mentioned and we'll feed back on that draft schedule.
Can you send that draft schedule to everybody, Marcella, or?
I don't think we can, Nora, because it's not agreed yet, do you know?
Okay.
So we just wanted to share it today to show the variety and you know, basically the amount of stuff that's covered in the SPC. Yeah. Once it's agreed, I think we should be able to share it with the PPN members, but we will have to, we can check in on that as well.
No worries, that'll do.
Sorry.
And I suppose, Lisa, I know you're wanting to come in there, and I'm mindful of the time now to get on to the next agenda point, but just to recognise that I wouldn't assume that they're in order of priority, although perhaps they are trying to schedule them according to the year. But if you have a priority need out of that that you want raised, let us know. And also in terms of the opportunity for external presentations, I'm mindful of our previous discussion about the broad issues of concern. So, you know, if you feel like at some stage during the year you'd like your organisation to raise, and I'm thinking that you'd have a capacity in you to raise broader issues of concern around housing for your wide remit of need, that is something that perhaps you'd like to consider asking for a space on the SPC with. So that's a suggestion with you. Lisa, did you have a question there? You have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, just in relation to these linkage groups, are they going to be a quarterly like the SPCs? Are you starting to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What I would say, Lisa, is once we get a schedule of meetings for the SPC, Cathy and I will then schedule, with Charlotte's help, I hope, some linkage group dates. We'll look at, and our idea at the moment, until we understand what the SPC schedule is going to be, is to have a linkage group near to the SPC, so we can collate the common themes, and we can also feed back after the SPC as well.
Right.
So yes, basically it will. That's the intention. We're
still waiting on that schedule of meeting dates. But once we have that, you'll have this. And I'm mindful of the time, but are there any other questions on what we've discussed today? Is it clear in terms of how you're seeing the SPC as a body of opportune support to your work? I think, yeah. We have space in the agenda there. Lisa, you're next up, actually. If you'd like to, we gave Lisa the time on the agenda today with a rationale to recognise that well, Lisa, you'll explain your remit, but Lisa has a remit in both sides of the houses of the city and the county in the context of housing. So this is how it works. If you'd like to have a space here on the linkage group as well, I think that actually might be a rolling agenda item where it would be nice if each who have a capacity to and would like to could do a presentation on their area of interest. So for example, Nora, I'd really be hungry for a snapshot of your context of work. I think that'd be really great to hear. It doesn't have to be formal, it can be this informal discussion just to give us a shared knowledge of understanding of, aha, this is where you're coming from, because housing is a leveler for all people, isn't it? We all need housing. So irrespective of your particular area of remit, it can bring us all together on the common theme of housing. But I think sharing a knowledge of each other's work and priorities would be really, really nice to see. So good start here with Lisa, if you'd like to come in, Lisa, there.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, my name's Lisa Fennick, and I've been with DFI for nearly 2 years now, and I'm one of their community development officers. And so in DFI, I'm part of the community team. My previous roles, I've been in disability sector for 15 years now. I was working with Muscular Dystrophy Ireland prior to DFI, so as a family support worker in the West. So I have quite a bit of experience in terms of working, you know, with people with disabilities, children with disabilities and their families. And I have a bit of, I suppose, an interest and some experience in terms of housing, specifically for people with disabilities and children with disabilities, and particularly with complex needs. So particularly around purpose-built accommodation, housing adaptation. So I've had that. I also, before my role with MDI, then I worked with Cope Galway when I first moved to Ireland. As you can see, I'm from England originally, and I worked in Osterley Lodge with homeless women. So I've got a few hats going on there, I suppose, in terms of the housing. But within my role in DFI, I would work quite closely with the local authorities, and with the development partnerships. So, for example, Galway Rural Development or Galway City Partnership. And I also work with advocacy groups, disability advocacy groups. So I would link in with ILMI, and I would work alongside Galway Access for All, which is an access group supported through Galway City Partnership. So I've just taken on some of Cathy's roles there recently. So I'll be sitting on the Housing Disability Steering Group in the city, and now the county as well. So those are some of the panels that I'll be included in. I've also been working with Charlotte on the newly formed Disability Forum within the County Council, and looking forward to getting more involved in that role there. So so that's really kind of my position in DFI. Also, obviously, we have over 120 member organisations, which I think of those, we have about 33 in the West and CHO2. And my role, again, is to link with the organisations like Clearness here from Ability West, and to see if they have any issues or, you know, any presenting issues that we can work with. So whether it's around transport, housing, that kind of thing. The community team as well, then we facilitate a national network of universal access groups. So and that network is growing around the country. And we'll be working with those groups in January around some training around their capacity building around the UNCPRD. So using that as a rights-based approach in terms of their advocacy work, and getting public bodies to engage and accept the implementation of the UNCPRD and see what work they're doing around that. So I suppose the UNCPRD has obviously its role to play around housing and looking at housing for people with disabilities from a rights-based approach. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for me or anything. I think you're on mute, Cathy.
Lisa, thanks for that. Here's where I suppose we missed the opportunity of the traditional Irish networking over a cup of tea, because I think that the value of your input and us here today would bleed out in the over the cup of tea chat, just to share how do you experience working with the council and how do you address issues of tenancy rights. I think that would be the nurturing, that would be the lovely thing that hopefully we'll have when we're able to meet up, please God, after the vaccines have done their job. Because I think that there's a lot of knowledge in each of ye in terms of how ye do your work, because you're all working to the same stakeholders of support, whether it's the statutory or community providers. So I think that that's the nugget of wisdom there. But now you know who Lisa is, and she's very available as a source of support. With thanks, many thanks, Lisa, for that introduction. And I'm mindful now, Cliona, you've got to go. So thanks for your support as well in today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to joining future meetings. Thanks a million.
Great.
I just have a quick question about the Housing and Disability Steering Group. It's not something that I, within the PPN, you know, I'm in touch with, but I think it's maybe something I should know about because of all the crossovers. So
Yeah.
is there any opportunity for maybe at the next next linkage group meeting that we do a little intro to that? Or
yeah, it's funny you should mention, because the County Galway just emailed me today notifying of their housing and disability steering group meeting happening this Friday. That's the first one they've had this year.
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's a bit, they're trying to get a recognition of it before the year end. Yeah, we can do that. I think
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive, I'm sensitive of my role as a rep, not just for disability. So I've been staying a bit quiet on the topic of disability, and I've been asking Lisa for her input in that regard, because it's the role of a rep to have a broader remit of regard, not just for her own or his own remit of work, but also the broader representation. So I'm really sensitive to keep the integrity of that real. But Lisa is the best champion for disability, so she can, and also she's taking on, I've asked her to take on those briefs of work, so she'll be on both those committees, so perhaps might be in a position to say something about them at the next meeting, if that's a good idea.
Or perhaps I could coach you, Lisa, and if you could present to the Galway Disability Forum on the steering group.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah,
the first meeting the second meeting of that group is 11th of January.
The 11th. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, great.
The other thing I'd say to you, Charlotte, as well, is Etna McKernan and Liam Hanrahan would be points of contact as well. Because Liam is the Director of Services chairs that forum.
Yeah.
So, like, I think obviously it's a strategic forum. Cathy would know better than me. I used to go to these a lot. I don't anymore because of just changing priorities. But I would also, if I was you, I'd get a steer from Etna and from Liam as well around.
So Etna and Liam. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask them
the admin. Okay. Liam, or is it Kira? Kira McGrath is the admin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or is it Kira McGrath now? Yeah, I actually got the same mails as you, Cathy, so I know this.
I think they were using an old mailing list, actually. So sorry now, Nora, we're not trying to monopolize the conversation on disability at all. We won't be held accountable for that. But at any stage, if you have similar structures of travelling community that you'd like to highlight to this group, I think that'd be warranted as well. You're on mute there, Nora. We're missing the value of
for my own background, I had 4 children with Hurler syndrome, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with Hurler syndrome. Okay, so they all passed away at different ages, and I was helping my sister. I had to fight. Well, we had to fight a big battle for the council to even rehouse them. Like Anne-Marie with Hurler syndrome, she's post-transplant when she was smaller, but she still has a lot of ongoing issues with her sight and walk and everything like that. And such a fight to even get them to actually get that transfer. So eventually they did buy the house, but if they did, it was like she could, and I wouldn't let her give up. Sometimes I'd say, look, I'll be you, and I'd write an email, because she was finding it difficult. And it was like she nearly, and I'm not lying, guys, she nearly had to beg them. They literally humiliated her at one stage, brought her in, and I'm not lying, this is the truth, into an office, denied. One of the reps there is actually related to Anne-Marie, and denied that she even knew her, any knowledge of her. So there's a lot of discrimination around disability within the travelling community from the local authority. We have a lot of children in there with autism, and hurlers as well is very prominent. And if you just take 5 minutes when you're finished, just Google Hurler syndrome, because within the community it is very strong. So we do have a lot of issues, so far now with the accommodation, just aside from my sister, I haven't linked with anyone yet, but I'm sure I will do in the future. We're trying to get appropriate housing, trying to get, so the house is adapted, things like this. It's just an ongoing issue, and with no real kind of, support there, I have to say that.
And this is it today. This is your linkage group for housing. And in some ways you'd wonder about the title of it, because it's not, when you get the built environment, it doesn't mean you're housed. It's housing and accommodation support, really, and particularly in the context of additional need. So it's recognise that, and that's where I would give a bit of hope to the space that policy is moving that way of thinking as well. At a national level, and it'll always come down to the local. They are thinking innovatively about recognising the dual role of support and accommodation. And this is your linkage group. So this is where you should be holding us accountable for addressing and raising in the first instance, your needs, including those you've outlined quite toughly there. And it's hard to hear, but it's really important that you're brave enough to keep saying those issues of concern, Nora, for those, and on behalf of those who don't have the energy, because it's a fight. It is a fight.
It is, and Cathy, and it's not going away. You know what I mean? It's there, and it's relevant, and it's stressful, and you know, as an advocate, I have no problem supporting them. You know, when you write to the council on their behalf, there's only so much we're actually allowed to say, and I tend to become very invested because of my own personal experience. Sometimes Vivian has to rein me back and say, no, well, look, you can say all that, like, and I do, my emails can be quite long. And Liam Hannon knows who I am, and so does Nuala Heffernan. You know, they know me, they know who I am, and I'm not going away. And I'm here to support my community, or anyone from any disadvantaged community as much as I can. And I'm on a learning process, guys, because I'm only doing this last year, so I'm just taking everything in, I'm soaking it all up, and sometimes I mightn't understand the terminology or something like that, but I'm taking it in, and I just love to have the opportunity to be part of this. And hopefully Vivian will let me do it again. I think she probably will, because she you know, she has delegated stuff to me. So if you'll have me, I'm delighted to be part of the
100%.
forum.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, and just to recognise, and the final point is disability, to recognise that it's my brief of work is different to Lisa's because it's specific around health. So when you mention the needs of those who you support in the travelling community around disabilities that are not given the due regard, you can come back to me, Nora, because it's we do have our membership, and it's a strong membership of organisations of support, and sometimes it's devastating, but sometimes it's just a matter of getting somebody to link in with somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes when you're fighting, but you realise you're on the wrong path. Actually, there's a door there.
Yeah, you're right, Cathy. And that was an issue, especially with my sister when I was supporting her. Sometimes you could write to an organisation, but they hadn't got the authority to help or something like that. You write to TDs and things like that. So to actually know where to go is very important, to get that support, you know. And for me to actually pass it on to a family as well, you know, because I'm, as I said, I might know myself, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So please feel free, outside of the remit of this, to engage with myself or Lisa on any of those fronts. And as I say, health is my brief, so I welcome the opportunity to talk to you anytime on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Same for me, Nora. If I can do anything for you, please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Yeah.
But you know something, just even like the opportunity to actually talk and say how you feel and say what the families are saying back, and have someone to listen, you know. And that's, I suppose, why Vivian, you know, kind of sent me up here to say, because I do get, as I said, I do get invested, because I don't like to give up. If someone asks me to help, I will keep going and going and going until I get some kind of, you know, resolution. So I can be a bit of a thorn in the side with the authorities sometimes, because I constantly email them. But that's what it's all about. It's having that connection with someone, because a lot of the community don't have that. And just to say, well, thank you for, you know, giving, you know, helping me and supporting me, whatever. And we need more people from our community to do that. And it's great to, you know, to be able to talk and to have like minds, you know what I mean? That's what's very important, because sometimes you knock at the door and nobody's opening, you know what I mean? Or sorry, you need to go to this door or whatever, and that door's sent you to another one. So this is, for me, it's great to be like, when I say to you guys, you know, the threshold, I have an issue with that, and that you can actually understand and be able to kind of say, yeah, we know where you're coming from. That's very important to me, because it feels like I'm doing something right, I'm getting somewhere, you know what I mean? And so I'm delighted just to even to have this opportunity to speak. So thanks, Vivian.
Well, I have to say, Nora, you've set the bar very high for the next meeting, and
Very high.
The rest of the PPN members have to step up now, definitely, to give the level of advocacy that you've raised today. So I commend you on that. And
thank you very much.
We do have the channel of Charlotte to support and coordinate this work of the linkage group, but I think we've all acknowledged today, Nora, that if you Google us, we're all available to support direct queries in regard to our particular areas of working lives. So feel free to pick up the phone at any stage.
Thank you very much.
Marcella, what do you think? Where are we at with our agenda today?
I think we're done, guys, but maybe I'm a bit, I just think we should end on a high via Nora, because to be honest, you're just inspirational, Nora. So fair play.
Oh,
do you know?
well, thank you very much, guys. But
you lifted my Tuesday, I won't lie. Do you know?
Thank you very much.
You know,
that's
to
great.
be fair to you, the resilience and the perseverance, I love it, I have to say, do you know?
Yeah.
And I just hope that Cathy and I can help to kind of bring a bit of clarity and a bit of context to some of the things. And like, we just look forward to working with you, and just please keep coming and keep contributing, do you know? And
Definitely.
just keep encouraging us the best way.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have, the next things are like the plan for the next linkage groups. We've covered that. We don't have a schedule of meetings. When we do have a schedule of meetings, we'll make sure that it's publicised to the PPA members. We'll put in some dates for the next linkage groups. You know, I'm glad that we did this. I hope it wasn't too, you know, too woolly kind of thing. We wanted to move it on. And I suppose what we need to do now is just basically to see what comes from the SPC forum, get the dates, get the linkage groups, and there's a lot of progress to be made. But even, you know, we've made steps forward today, massive steps, do you know? Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. So I don't know, like, I don't have much more, if anything, to add. I don't know about you, Cathy, Nora, Lisa, Charlotte. You know, I'm happy with how today's gone. We've recorded the session. I'm sure people will come back to us with more queries anyway. And I'm happy to leave it there, guys. I don't know about you.
Yeah, just a quick question. If anybody is looking for a recording, can I share this, or would you prefer that I not?
I don't mind.
I don't mind either.
I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Hey guys, thank you very much. It's lovely meeting you all.
Same to you, Nora. Absolutely. And you, Lisa. And happy Christmas. All right.
Same to you.
Have a
Have a good one.
Thank
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Cathy. Bye,
Bye.
Charlotte.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for your
much.
help. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for your help today, Charlotte. Bye.
Thanks a million, guys.